This is a conversation with our founder, James H. Sills Jr., somebody I met within a year of landing in the United States, and you've made a tremendous impact on me. Happy birthday, a big one coming up, October 2021. 90 years of fighting the good fight.
Yeah, I'll be 90 years old, October the 6th. We've been through a lot.
Yes, yes.
But thanks for inviting me to be here.
So like me, I'm a transplant from half the world away, India.
Yeah.
You are a transplant to Wilmington as well, right? What brought you here?
I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina, a city about the same size as Wilmington. Has about 85,000 people in it. And I've been in Wilmington since I came to Wilmington in 1959. I didn't know a soul when I got here. And in fact, the red cap at the train station sent me to the YMCA to get help on where to find a place to bring my family. And I've been here ever since for a lot of years, and I've seen a lot of changes. And but it's been a good trip, a good experience. Although some people still tell me I'm not a Wilmingtonian yet.
I know.
But I've had a good life here.
Yes, you have. You've taught at the University of Delaware. You became the first black mayor of this great city of Wilmington, where you're still an outsider. You've done a lot of advocacy work. So in all of these various careers, tracks, you've had enormous impact, not just in Wilmington, but all of Delaware. How did you do that?
Well, I hope so. I'll leave it to other people to say whether I've had an impact. I'll let others make that judgment. But it's been a good experience. I've witnessed a lot of change, and some negative, some mostly positive. But obviously, we still have a lot more to do, a lot more change to experience, especially in connection with the juvenile crime problem in Wilmington.
Mm-hmm. You know, right now we talk, for the last couple of years, we have talked a lot about the opioid crisis. But when I was your intern way back when, one of the programs that you ran was DECASA, Delaware Clusters Against Substance Abuse. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Vaguely, right. But those were areas that you heard from the community. You were a state rep for the city of Wilmington, so a lot of people contacted you. As your intern, I know your phone never stopped ringing.
Yeah.
I used to answer, and there were all kinds of issues that callers would bring to your attention, which you then took to your teaching career as the professor at University of Delaware. You took that to your political career, of course, and your advocacy.
Yeah.
You were involved with people settlement. You were at the NAACP. Those are the two things I know about. I bet you were trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a rich experience I've had, and I'm proud of some things that we got done. A lot of things yet to be done. But let's talk about DCRAC. What would you like to ask me about DCRAC?
Yeah, so all of that, I think, because your last advocacy act before your political career took over was founding this great organization, DCREC.
Yeah.
What got you thinking about it, and how did you make it happen?
Well, in 1987, Congress passed Community Reinvestment Act, which was expected to get the banks to be more responsive to the needs of low-income and minority groups. And one of the stipulations in the law was that when a bank sought to expand or to merge with another bank, it had to get federal approval. And the federal approval required that local groups, community groups, have some input and have some say, have some chance to react to the proposed merger or expansion that the banks were seeking to make. And Delaware Trust, in 1987, was being considered to be merged with a bank in Philadelphia. And under the Community Reinvestment Act, we filed a protest. We said there are a lot of things that the Delaware Trust has not done, especially in terms of making loans available to low-income people in census tracts in the Wilmington area. So we filed a protest. We said the merger shouldn't go through unless Delaware Trust made some changes in its policies and procedures and was in a position to be more responsive to the needs of low-income communities. We won that protest. The federal government did approve Delaware Trust being absorbed by a bank in Philadelphia, but required Delaware Trust to make some changes in its loan policies and to be more responsive to the credit needs of low-income people in the Wilmington area.
So can I go back just a tad bit? Because in 87, I think it was the month of August, when you invited leaders from around the state. There were folk from Sussex County, Kent County, Newcastle County, Wilmington, I think at People's Settlement. And you got them together and you basically informed them that here are our opportunities, here is discrimination in lending. If you are black, you are 7.5 times more likely to be denied a mortgage, and that ought not to be. Here is our opportunity. And that very night, you asked them, should we create an organization like DCREC? And they said yes.
That brings back a lot of memories, but it was in 1987. I sent a letter to virtually every nonprofit group throughout the state of Delaware and said, look, here's an opportunity to make a difference, and here's an opportunity to become a legal entity, another nonprofit. And we called the meeting at the YMCA and of nonprofit groups from throughout the state of Delaware. We had about 35 people from throughout the state that came to that first meeting, and we agreed that we wanted to become incorporated and become a legal entity and to be a nonprofit specifically to challenge Delaware Trust and other banks that were seeking to merge or be expanded in connection with the Community Reinvestment Action Council. And we had some success with Delaware Trust. And later we challenged the Bank of Delaware application to be merged with another bank. And we later challenged the application of the Wilmington Savings Fund Society to merge with another bank. We got all three banks to agree to put up some $900,000 to form a nonprofit entity specifically to make loan counseling available to people who were trying to get mortgage loans from the bank. We said to the banks, you helped to create a problem by denying people the opportunity to get bank loans, and now to resolve that problem, you need to help the community by setting up a special nonprofit to help low-income communities deal with the credit problems and help those low-income groups to be more acceptable, to be more ready to be approved by the banks for mortgage loans. That was a big step in getting the banks to provide $900,000 specifically to help people get ready and to be prepared to get loans from the banks. It was a big step.
It certainly was. And it really was a pioneer step because Jim Sills' efforts through these CRA negotiations got on track a profession that is highly respected today, and that is housing counseling. Nationwide, banks now turn to housing counseling agencies to prepare homeowners in their journey towards home ownership. So that is something that was not in existence pre-Jim Sills advocacy era. Something else that you got in those 3 CRA agreements was a first-time home buyer program. Again, you were way ahead of all advocates nationwide in terms of getting a first-time home buyer program started that had below market rates, that had flexible underwriting guidelines, did not require a potential homeowner to come up with so much money. And the review was, how much are you paying in rent right now? And if you were paying less in mortgage, then you were mortgage ready if you'd gone through housing counseling. So those are tremendous, not just Delaware impacts, but nationwide, all through within the first couple of years, the CRA agreements. Plus, banks came to the agreement kicking and screaming, but 2.5 years later, they reported they had met every single commitment that they were supposed to meet in 5 years. They met in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And they openly, publicly said, you opened a new market for us.
Yeah. Well, the banks came to understand that that low-income communities represented a new market and a chance for them to derive profits from an area that they had neglected. And so it was a win-win for the community and a win-win for the banks. I was president of DCRAC from 1987 to 1992. And we were able to get funding for DCRAC from the General Assembly. I was able to get the University of Delaware to provide interns, and we were able to get support for DCRAC from other institutions in the Wilmington area. And in 1992, I decided to run for mayor and resigned from DCRAC. And did you come on as president of DCRAC, or was that someone who came in before you?
So when you became the mayor of the city of Wilmington, you sucked all the oxygen out of DCREC by taking the entire executive committee came with you.
Yeah.
So there were a few board members, and Keith Booker became the chairman of the organization. It was without an executive director for about 2 years, and then they hired a consultant who said that it needed a paid staff, so they went on a interview. I interviewed for that position. I was not their first choice. I was not their second choice. But December 14th, 1994, I came on as the executive director.
But also, before becoming the executive director, if my memory serves me correctly, you were also an intern.
With you. You taught me a lot.
Came from the university to work at DCREC as an intern.
Yep.
It's funny how that turned out, that you went from an intern to become the executive director.
I know.
And you've made a lot of strides. You've done a lot of good in Wilmington with DCREC, inclusive of setting up a federal credit union.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Oh, thank you for asking. Stepping Stones Community Federal Credit Union is thriving. I'll tell you things. It is a federal home loan bank. It is a CDFI. It is the Certified Minority Depository Institution. It has more than 1,000 members. It is the sole bank provider for Department of Correction facilities, so inmates. It is working, it's got a lot of loan programs. By this time next year, we will have mortgages. It is thriving. Right now, we are working with another fintech run by a African-American female who we are negotiating. We've actually signed the contract, who's going to provide debit cards for our members. Oh, we are doing superbly well, and sky is the limit.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. I've been receiving reports of the progress that you've made, and it's good to know that you've been able to have a lot of success with that. Looking to the future in terms of CRA, I don't know that Congress has made any changes in the CRA law since 1987. Has it?
Yes, CRA did go through 2 iterations, and the latest one was in the Dodd-Frank bill. There were a lot of strong consumer protection. We got the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau out of our advocacy effort. We got some great things, but unfortunately, Washington is very fickle. So with each change in administration, either we make gains or we have to walk back a few steps. So last several years have been very busy advocacy-wise. And that reminds me actually of your involvement in creating yet another agency, and that was NCRC, National Community Reinvestment Coalition. You were on the founding executive committee, on the executive search. You brought on John Taylor, who's retired now, and NCRC is run by Jesse Van Toll. And Jesse is doing a phenomenal job. But what I am reminded of every day these days is the cyclical nature of advocacy. We are back to doing the same kind of advocacy that you did back in 1987. Because we made some gains, but the losses have been so significant that now at the national level, because we have national banks, we don't have very many smaller banks. So it's NCRC that is negotiating CRA agreements for our communities and community members.
Well, there's a need, and you touched upon this, there's a need for the national organization to be even stronger, to have greater impact on legislation that needs to be enacted at the Washington level. For example, I think we need to get DCRAC and other local CRA groups from across the country to create more of a groundswell for Congress to improve the CRA law. For example, banks put money in local banks by opening up deposit accounts, but we need to get federal legislation which requires or provides an opportunity for banks to do more than just put money in local minority banks, but also to put money in local minority banks, a portion of which can be used to be made available to loans to people in the local community, or helping banks or requiring banks to take equity positions in local minority banks, and helping banks to make money available, to make sure that their money is not only being used to be deposited in local minority banks, but some of their money is being used to make loans available to low-income groups. And we need some changes in the federal law to provide more incentives for banks to put money in local minority banks to achieve that particular goal. There's also a need for the federal government to provide more incentives for banks to make grants available to nonprofit groups like yours. We need to provide more support to nonprofit groups because nonprofit groups depend heavily upon local nonprofit groups to provide services and to provide services and benefits that are made available through nonprofit groups. But the law doesn't provide enough incentives to banks to make grants to nonprofit groups. That needs to change. And banks need to be given credit, more credit, for making grants available to nonprofit groups. And so there are changes that need to be made at the federal level. And I would suggest that DCRAC and other nonprofit groups across the country need to be involved in trying to create a climate for those changes to take place. So there's still a lot more to be done, and a lot of it's going to require changes in the federal CRA laws.
Yes. And every time CRA comes up, you used to say, CRA is the law that banks love to hate. Every time any tweaks, anything come up, sometimes it heads in the right direction, sometimes it's going in the wrong direction, like the OCC rule that thankfully is behind us now. But some things, some changes that definitely need to happen is the timing and the length of the grant. What happens right now, if I am a bank and I've invested $250,000 at Stepping Stones, I can invest it only for 1 year to get the CRA credit for this year. And Stepping Stones does not make a single loan that is only 1 year loan. So if a bank got CRA credit equally for 5 years and they gave us, the bank deposited $250,000 on a 5-year basis and got CRA credit, we could use those funds for loans. So, legislation is posing barriers to both the bank's desire to help and the community credit unions, small banks' desire to ability to meet the need. So we have every opportunity that we get, we have raised that as an issue, the mismatch between term and deposit. So that's a good one.
You really speak to a need that needs to be more effectively addressed, and it has to do with education. We need to help local communities, including Wilmington community, to play more of an advocacy role at the federal level.
Yes.
And that requires helping local communities to be better educated in terms of their potential for political power and their potential for effecting change at the federal level. You know, we need local communities to have more advocacy impact on what takes place at the federal level. And I don't know that we're doing enough to make that happen.
We are not doing enough to make that happen. You're absolutely right. Certainly, there is no funding for community organizing, and all of our work takes a lot of money. So there isn't enough funding. Plus, many nonprofits are afraid of advocacy because of the lobbying restrictions. So those are some legislative funding barriers that hold us back. But I would say, I think it is the funding that is critical. So I am thankful that you raise the need for institutions, and not just financial institutions, but corporations, to support the work of the nonprofit, because it is the drip, 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 drip that creates enough agony out there that say, oh, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. So, yes.
Well, local communities represent the potential for considerable more empowerment, and it requires an educational process that local communities have to go through to realize that they have that kind of potential. Teachers have their unions, and local business groups have the Chamber of Commerce. We don't have enough local groups serving as advocates for change at the federal level, similar to what some other well-known institutions around the country have through paying lobbyists to advocate for them at the federal level. And we need to work to help local community groups to be more advocates for change at the federal level. I'm not sure how to go about doing that, except that it represents a dire need. And I hope we're, to what extent do you think we're making progress in that area?
In terms of the not-for-profit community, in Delaware we have DANA, the Delaware Advancing Nonprofits, I forgot, but DANA, that lobbies and advocates for the broader nonprofit community's needs. Like in the COVID, how stretched we were and what kind of funding we needed, and they really stepped up and got the not-for-profit community access to a lot of funding. But in terms of advocacy for our grassroots, we have Network Delaware that is doing exactly what you're talking about. educating the grassroots, giving them the ability to understand how to fight for change, to enter into politics and things like that, as are so many. I know the Coalition of 100 Black Women are doing a lot. A lot of the sororities and fraternities are, particularly after George Floyd, the recognition that we need to organize in a more structured manner, because then we are heard, we are seen, we are heard, we get results. So you're right. I mean, one challenge, of course, you have given to DCREC is that we need to make the right changes happen so that the community is served better. Another challenge is that we need to be seen, heard, so that we get investments. Because what perfect time? Now is the time for community reinvestment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of that we are talking about. Your pal and our resident who is in the White House, Joe Biden, talks about building back better. How easy is it to build back better? Community reinvestment.
Well, you know, Rashmi, that there's a momentum out there that we need to
tap into,
capitalize on. It's good to see the business and corporate community being more responsive now compared to 20 or 30 years ago. Banks are not waiting for the federal government to necessarily pass a minimum wage law.
Yeah.
Banks on their own are making money, more money available in terms of salaries and wages for low-income groups. And banks and corporate community are getting showing more support for laws to help people to vote and be a part of the political process. The business and corporate community obviously need to do more, but there are some signs and changes that are taking place, and we need to be in a position to encourage more of that, and making even more demands upon the business and corporate community to be more responsive to the needs and rights of low-income groups. And I think it's encouraging to see some of that taking place, grudgingly, but it's taking place, and we need to be in a position to encourage more of that.
Thank you so much for your time and this generous history and a charge for moving forward and the direction that we need for us to take so that it's the right one for the community.
Well, your agency has done a great deal. You've got a beautiful facility over on Harrison Street, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
You have a greater number of staff people. How many staff people do you have now?
We are 10 people strong.
Oh boy, that's great.
I know.
10 people. You've established a real presence in Wilmington, and more people know about community reinvestment. More people are being supportive of community reinvestment, especially in connection with the work of your credit unions, or your credit union. So you've done a lot, and you're to be applauded for the progress that you've made, and I encourage you to keep at it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.